Remember to hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible content. The email from Marcus's teacher landed in my inbox like a cold splash of reality. His mathematics scores were plummeting, and as a single parent already stretched thin, between my demanding job and household responsibilities, I felt the familiar weight of inadequacy settle on my shoulders. Mathematics had never been my strong suit, making it impossible for me to provide the academic support he desperately needed. Finding a qualified tutor became my immediate priority. After several phone calls and recommendations, I arranged for someone to come to our home. The prospect of professional help offered a small beacon of hope in what felt like an endless cycle of academic struggles and evening battles over homework. Ethan arrived at our doorstep exactly on time the following Tuesday. I barely managed introductions before he was arranging his materials across our kitchen table with practiced efficiency. His demeanor struck me as both professional and approachable, a welcome change from the chaos that typically defined our household routine. Marcus seemed to respond positively to his presence, which provided immediate relief. Initially, I maintained my distance, observing from the periphery as Ethan demonstrated remarkable patience while explaining complex mathematical concepts. He possessed a gift for breaking down intimidating problems into manageable components, and for the first time in months, I witnessed genuine engagement from my son during study time. Yet Ethan's perceptiveness extended beyond academic matters. He seemed to notice subtle details, the way I hovered uncertainly in doorways, the exhaustion that had become my constant companion, the brittle smiles I wore like protective armor. His awareness of these things both unsettled and intrigued me. One particular afternoon, as their session was concluding, Ethan surprised me by suggesting I join their discussion. Sometimes parents benefit from understanding the learning process too, he offered gently. Though hesitant, I found myself accepting his invitation. Sitting beside them, I realized how disconnected I had become from Marcus beyond our daily conflicts over assignments and responsibilities. Ethan's questions encouraged genuine conversation about aspirations, concerns, and dreams. The atmosphere in our home felt lighter somehow, less burdened by constant tension. His inquiries weren't limited to academic subjects, they touched on life itself. The way he listened, with genuine attention and without judgment, stirred something within me that had been dormant for far too long. After that session, Ethan lingered to help organize the study materials, and I found myself sharing fragments of my own struggles, the isolation that crept in during quiet evening hours, the overwhelming nature of single parenthood. Rather than offering empty platitudes, he shared glimpses of his own challenges, moments when life had demanded premature maturity and resilience. That exchange created the first crack in the emotional barriers I had constructed around myself. For the first time in years, I felt genuinely understood. Over the subsequent weeks, Ethan's visits evolved into something more significant than academic support for Marcus. I discovered myself anticipating his arrival, appreciating his calming presence and the way he communicated without passing judgment. While my son flourished academically, I was experiencing a profound internal transformation. Gradually, I began revealing stories from my past, hopes and ambitions that had been buried beneath the weight of a failed marriage and the demands of survival. Ethan listened with extraordinary patience, never rushing or imposing expectations, simply offering authentic connection. He encouraged me to consider my own desires rather than just accepting what circumstances had provided. This encouragement was simultaneously terrifying and exhilarating. One evening, after Marcus had gone to bed, Ethan and I found ourselves engaged in deep conversation in the quiet kitchen. Our discussion meandered from trivial matters to profoundly personal revelations. He asked questions that compelled me to examine my own happiness and pain. Tears came unexpectedly, surprising me with their intensity. It felt as though a long festering wound was finally being exposed to healing air. I began to understand that Ethan wasn't merely a tutor, he was becoming a reflection of aspects of myself I had forgotten existed: vulnerability, hope, and even desire. The realization frightened me while simultaneously awakening parts of my spirit I had resigned to permanent silence. There were moments of awkwardness as well, fleeting contacts when exchanging materials, accidental touches, stolen glances across the room. I wrestled with questions of appropriateness and wondered if I was being foolish. Yet beneath the uncertainty, there was a longing I could no longer ignore. I repeatedly reminded myself to maintain focus on Marcus's needs and keep our Interactions strictly professional. However, Ethan's presence gradually dismantled my carefully constructed emotional walls. He remained respectful and patient, yet possessed a quiet boldness, a gentle smile that lingered, a look that extended just beyond the boundaries of casual interaction. When Marcus spent a weekend with his paternal grandmother, Ethan stayed longer than usual. We shared a quiet dinner together, something we had never done previously. Though seemingly casual, the evening was charged with unspoken emotions and possibilities. As night deepened, I recognized how desperately I craved this type of connection, the warmth, the attention, the sensation of feeling truly alive again. That night, I lay awake contemplating everything I had kept locked away. Ethan had awakened feelings I believed were permanently lost, sensations of being desired, understood, and valued. While terrifying to acknowledge, it was also incredibly liberating. The more time I spent with Ethan, the more I reconnected with who I was beyond the roles of parent, employee, and caretaker. I was a woman who still possessed dreams, passions, and a heart that yearned to beat freely once more. Our developing relationship was undeniably complicated. I understood the risks, the potential for judgment, the possible consequences. Yet Ethan never applied pressure. Instead, he offered kindness and patience, teaching me that it was acceptable to feel again, to hope, to want. As Marcus's academic performance improved, so did my emotional well-being. I began smiling more genuinely, laughing without reservation, and dreaming about possibilities I had long abandoned. Ethan wasn't just a tutor who came to teach mathematics, he was an unexpected mentor who helped me rediscover my authentic self. Doubts persisted, and the world beyond our home wasn't always kind to women in my situation. However, in Ethan's presence, I found sanctuary, a space where vulnerability was safe and fear was unnecessary. Looking back, I realized that sometimes the lessons we need most aren't the ones we anticipate. Ethan came to help Marcus, but he ended up teaching me how to live, how to feel, and how to love myself again. The atmosphere between Ethan and me had become charged with an energy I could no longer deny. That particular evening, after Marcus's tutoring session had concluded, Ethan hesitated at our front door as if wrestling with unspoken words. Acting on impulse, something that surprised even me, I invited him to stay. We settled in the living room, soft lamplight casting dancing shadows across the walls. My heartbeat seemed unnaturally loud as Ethan regarded me with an expression I hadn't seen before, no longer just the tutor, but a man who saw beyond the exhausted parent to something deeper. "I need to be honest with you," he began, his voice low and steady. "This hasn't been just about tutoring Marcus for quite some time. At least not for me." I swallowed hard, trying to steady my breathing as the protective walls I had built began crumbling with each word. "I see you," he continued, his gaze sincere and unwavering. "Not just the fatigue or the stress, but the woman underneath it all. You're stronger than you realize, but also profoundly lonely." Yes, I wanted to help Marcus, but I also wanted to reach you, to remind you that you're alive, that you matter. His words struck a chord deep within me. The loneliness that had become my constant companion suddenly felt exposed, yet strangely comforting to share. For a moment, silence hung between us, thick with unspoken emotions. Without conscious thought, I reached out, my fingers brushing his. It was a tentative gesture, but it shattered the distance between us. Ethan didn't withdraw. Instead, he moved closer, his warmth enveloping me. "I never intended for this to happen," he whispered, his voice trembling just enough to reveal his own vulnerability. "But I can't ignore what I feel." I looked into his eyes and saw a reflection of my own yearning for connection, for understanding, for something genuine in a world that often felt hollow. We remained like that for what seemed like hours, speaking in hushed tones about our respective pasts, the things we had lost, and the things we still dared to hope for. There was no urgency, no pressure, only a gradual unfolding of emotions that had been buried for far too long. At one point, Ethan gently cupped my face in his hands. "You deserve to feel alive," he said softly. "Not just as a mother or caretaker, but as a woman." The honesty in his words broke through my remaining reservations. I realized I had been denying myself for so long that I had forgotten what it meant to truly feel. We moved closer, the tension between us intensifying. But it was different from the awkwardness I had feared. It was a quiet, respectful intimacy, That felt like coming home. When his lips finally met mine, it was tender and hesitant, a promise rather than a demand. I responded slowly, allowing myself to be vulnerable, to trust again. That kiss represented a turning point, not just about desire, but about reclaiming parts of myself I thought were lost forever. In the days that followed, our connection deepened through stolen moments between tutoring sessions, quiet conversations, lingering glances, and small touches that spoke volumes. Yet it wasn't without complications. I struggled with guilt and worried about others' perceptions, about the boundaries I was crossing. But Ethan remained patient, never pushing, always respecting my pace. On a stormy afternoon, as rain lashed against the windows, we found ourselves alone in the house. The power flickered, leaving the room dimly lit, but the tension between us was unmistakable. Ethan reached for my hand, guiding me to the sofa. "You don't have to be afraid," he said, his voice steady and reassuring. "I'm here." I searched his eyes for truth, finding vulnerability that mirrored my own. Slowly, I released my fears. We talked openly about what this meant, about risks and hopes. Our conversation was raw and honest, filled with moments of both laughter and tears. It felt as though we were peeling away layers, revealing our authentic selves. That night, sitting close together, I realized that Ethan wasn't just a tutor or a temporary presence in my life. He was becoming someone who could heal the broken parts of me. He had taught me that it was acceptable to want, to hope, to be seen. The lines between teacher and student blurred, but respect and care never wavered. One evening, as Marcus slept upstairs, Ethan and I sat by the window, watching the city lights twinkle in the distance. He took my hand and said, "I never imagined this when I first walked through your door, but I'm grateful for it." I smiled, feeling a warmth I hadn't experienced in years. "I'm learning how to feel again," I admitted softly. "Because of you." He squeezed my hand gently. "And I'm learning what it means to truly care." Our connection was imperfect, complicated by circumstances, but it was genuine. In Ethan, I found more than a tutor. I found a mirror reflecting the woman I was rediscovering, strong, vulnerable, and alive. That night, as we said goodnight, I felt a sense of peace I had long forgotten. The journey ahead remained uncertain, but for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid to face it. Ethan had taught me the most important lesson of all, that truly feeling was the first step toward healing and love. After that night when Ethan kissed me so tenderly, everything within me shifted, though the external world remained unchanged. My days continued to be filled with routine tasks: preparing breakfast for Marcus, managing household responsibilities, working late into the evening. Yet beneath the surface, my heart was in turmoil as emotions I thought were permanently buried had resurfaced like an uncontrollable flood. I found myself replaying that kiss repeatedly, the slight tremor in his lips, the warmth of his hands holding mine, the gentleness in his eyes that made me feel truly seen for the first time in years. It was intoxicating yet terrifying. Guilt gnawed at me relentlessly. How could I betray the trust of my family? Marcus was innocent in all of this, and Ethan was supposed to be nothing more than his academic instructor. Yet here I was, caught in an emotional web that threatened to unravel everything I had worked so hard to keep stable. Every time Ethan arrived for another tutoring session, I battled with my own desires. I told myself to maintain professional boundaries, to focus solely on Marcus's progress. But the way Ethan looked at me with quiet understanding and kindness made it impossible to pretend. One afternoon, while Marcus was upstairs practicing his mathematics problems, Ethan remained behind to discuss additional study materials with me. Our conversation began casually, but there was an unspoken tension that filled the room, thickening the air between us. I didn't expect this either. His words felt like both a confession and a challenge. Could I allow myself to feel again without fear? Could I open my heart without losing everything I had built? There were moments when I doubted myself, when years of loneliness and loss made me want to retreat into the safety of emotional numbness. I worried about what friends and family would say if they discovered the truth. Would they judge me? Would they understand? But Ethan never judged. He listened, he cared, and in his presence, I began to realize that my feelings were valid, that my desire to connect and be loved wasn't selfish but human. Yet with every tender look and gentle touch, the tension grew unbearable. I wanted him, but I was terrified of what it meant. The fear of losing control, of making a mistake that could shatter the fragile stability I had created, haunted me constantly. One evening, after a tutoring session, Ethan lingered a little longer. The house was quiet, and shadows seemed to dance on the walls as the sun set beyond the horizon. He reached out and took my hand, his fingers warm against my skin. "I'm here," he whispered. "You don't have to be afraid." His words broke through my defenses. Tears welled up in my eyes as I realized how deeply I had been hurting, how much I had been hiding from myself. "I'm scared," I confessed, my voice trembling. Scared of what this could mean, scared of losing everything. Ethan pulled me into a gentle embrace. "I don't want to hurt you. I want to help you heal." In that moment, the walls around my heart began to crumble. I allowed myself to lean into his comfort, to feel the warmth and safety of another person's arms. But even as I surrendered to the moment, the reality of our situation loomed large. Ethan was young, vibrant, and full of hope, qualities I admired and envied. I was older, worn down by life, carrying the weight of responsibility and loss. Would this connection survive the inevitable challenges? Could we find a way to bridge the gap between our different worlds? The tension between desire and doubt consumed me. I wanted to trust Ethan, to believe in the possibility of happiness, but the past whispered warnings I couldn't ignore. One afternoon, as we sat reviewing Marcus's assignments, a sudden knock at the door startled us. It was my sister, unexpected and unannounced. Her eyes flicked between Ethan and me, and I felt a rush of panic. "What's going on here?" she asked, her voice sharp with suspicion. I fumbled for words, trying to explain the tutoring arrangement, but the underlying tension was obvious. My sister's gaze lingered on Ethan longer than necessary, and I could see the judgment in her eyes. After she left, the silence between Ethan and me was heavy with unspoken questions. "Do you think this can work?" I finally asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Ethan looked at me with unwavering sincerity. "If we're honest with ourselves and each other, I believe it can." His confidence gave me hope, but I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. I wrestled with conflicting emotions daily, the joy of feeling alive again, the fear of crossing boundaries, the shame of wanting something forbidden. Sleep became elusive, my mind filled with fantasies and fears in equal measure. Yet through it all, Ethan remained a steady presence. He didn't rush me or pressure me. Instead, he offered kindness, patience, and understanding. Our connection deepened in subtle ways, a lingering touch on the hand, a shared smile across the room, quiet moments when words were unnecessary. Each small gesture fueled the growing flame between us, even as the world around us demanded caution. One rainy evening, as the storm raged outside, Ethan and I found ourselves alone. The power flickered, and the room was dim, but the tension between us was undeniable. He reached for me again, his hands trembling slightly as he pulled me closer. "I want to be with you," he confessed, his voice thick with emotion. Tears streamed down my face as I nodded. "I want that too, but I'm scared." He wiped my tears gently. "We'll face the fear together." In that moment, the barriers broke down completely. We allowed ourselves to be vulnerable, to admit our hopes and doubts. The passion that had simmered beneath the surface finally ignited. But it was more than desire, it was a connection forged through shared pain and healing. As we held each other close, I realized that Ethan wasn't just a tutor or a fleeting presence in my life. He was becoming someone who could heal the parts of me that had been broken. He taught me that it was okay to want, to hope, to be seen. Yet even in this newfound closeness, the tension remained, the tension of what lay ahead, the challenges we would have to face, and the uncertain future. But for the first time in years, I felt ready to face it all, because Ethan had taught me the most important lesson, that truly feeling was the first step toward healing and love. In the weeks that followed, Ethan and I found a delicate balance between our growing connection and the responsibilities that anchored me to reality. We decided to keep our relationship private for now, respecting the boundaries that protected Marcus's well-being and my family's trust. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. Slowly, the walls around my heart continued to crumble. I discovered joy in small moments, a genuine laugh, a tender touch, the warmth of someone who truly understood me. Ethan's presence became a steady source of comfort and hope, not only for me, but for Marcus, who was thriving under his guidance. I realized that healing wasn't about erasing the past, but learning to carry it with grace. Ethan had taught me how to feel again, to embrace vulnerability, to accept love even when it scared me, and to believe that second chances were possible. Though the future remained uncertain, I was no longer afraid. I had found strength in opening my heart, in allowing myself to be seen and loved. Our story was just beginning, imperfect, complicated, and deeply real. But for the first time in a long time, I was ready to face it with hope. And that made all the difference. The tension between us had become undeniable. We chose honesty over silence. And though the path ahead was fraught with difficulty, I knew we could no longer live in fear. My family's reactions were mixed: disappointment, confusion, even anger. But with time, some began to understand the complexity of human emotions, the gray areas between right and wrong. Ethan and I committed to setting boundaries to protect our family, while honoring what we had discovered between us. It wasn't an easy road. There were moments of pain and regret, but also moments of healing and growth. I learned that love doesn't always fit neatly into expectations, and sometimes the bravest act is to face the truth, no matter how uncomfortable. In the end, we chose compassion both for ourselves and for those around us. The future remained uncertain, but I felt a new strength rising inside me, a strength born of acceptance, honesty, and the courage to live authentically. And in that strength, I found peace.